Real Estate Talk is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask Ken a question, recommend a guest, and watch this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Real Estate Talk is brought to you by our friends at Spokane Association of Realtors. We wish you a great day.
Well, greetings. I am Ken Sax. You are listening to Real Estate Talks, and excited for another show. Glad you could join us. And my guest today is Mr. Terry Sullivan. Terry, welcome.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate the opportunity.
You betcha. Welcome to the show. Terry, let's first start off with an introduction. Who are you and what are you about?
Well, I'm a second-generation residential realtor in Spokane.
Okay.
And primarily today my function is going to be to speak as a federal political coordinator, FPC.
Love it.
For the National Association of Realtors, and specifically on federal issues. So as an FPC, Ken, we are selected by our local, or our state rather, Government Affairs Committee to serve in this position. And the function of the position is to interact with our member of Congress. In the 5th Congressional District, I'm Kathy McMorris's FPC.
Sure.
And there is one of us, realtor volunteers, for every member of Congress. So that represents 535 members of the Realtor Association that are charged with being the lead person in their communication with the members of Congress relative to federal issues.
Mm-hmm.
And the other point I want to mention is that as a member of this federal political coordinator group, we represent no one party in particular.
Right.
We are the Realtor Party. And for the record, the contributions that are made in support of candidates, incumbents or first-time candidates for political positions at the federal level, our distribution of funds is pretty equal between the D's and the R's.
Sure.
And there is also consideration for independence. So it's a position I've held and enjoy dating back to when Tom Foley was Speaker of the House. Tom Foley being a Spokane man and a graduate from my high school, which was Gonzaga Prep. So the Realtor Party is represented quite well by the FPCs, and we are pretty effective. We are trained, we are accountable to our national leadership for being in touch once a quarter, minimum, with our member of Congress. And of course, most of those are in person when we can catch up, in my case, to Kathy in the district.
Sure.
As you can recall, last month in May, we represented the Washington Realtors and had a visit with Kathy to present the talking points. The primary focus of my comments today are going to be these talking points. So I'm glad to be able to bring this information forth.
Sure. And as Terry said, I guess it was a month ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, we were in Washington, D.C., and we met with Kathy McMorris Rogers, and I was able to witness firsthand kind of Terry at work. But it's also important to know we've had shows here where we've talked about our visit to Olympia and meeting with our state legislators. But it's important to understand, because one could be listening to us thinking, boy, you guys, it's just all about you, and it's what you guys want, what's best for you. But the reason we go to Olympia and the reason we went to D.C. and Terry has this relationship with McMorris Rogers is to, what's our purpose? We are to protect what and who?
Well, we're like the LAPD. We're here to serve and protect, but the focus is on buyers and sellers of real estate, landlords, tenants, and anybody else that has an interest in maintaining their home ownership or their bundle of rights under the Constitution.
That's right.
That's our focus.
That's right. We are focused and determined to protect your rights, whether you're a buyer or seller. We've done we did plenty of shows on the Hearst decision, which you may remember, which we ultimately got that overturned. That's to benefit the consumer, so people can do with their property what they wish, so we don't lose tremendous value in the property that you own, whether it's for your retirement or your current property, etc. But the point I'm trying to make, Terry, and to our listeners, we do this, and our passion and our purpose is to protect your rights, and that is our focus. It's just done through us realtors who work with you folks every day. So that's why we went to D.C. And we had definite talking points and a mission, if you will, when we traveled out there. So we're going to talk about what those talking points were. So
Sure.
Terry, what were we doing out there? What did we do?
Well, we got some really good input up to the minute from our chief lobbyist, Jerry Giovanella in D.C., and they're generally going to tell us the real meat on the bone proposition for issues with our members of Congress. And today, Ken, we're going to talk about 4 of them,
Okay.
which is the Fair Housing Act, I think in order of sequence, net neutrality, changes to the tax reform, and finally to National Flood Insurance Program.
Okay, good. So fair housing.
Well, this is the 50th year of the enactment of the Fair Housing Act, which was signed by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. And I'm going to quote what he stated at the time. It says, "The Housing Act proclaims that there is fair housing for all human beings who live in this country is now a part of the American way of life." And I've learned in my exposure to this topic, Ken, that since its passage 50 years ago, the Act has expanded, from the initial protected classes of race, color, religion, national origin. We're now seeing a new millennial approach to bringing this important issue in housing to the national level, basically to our members of Congress. The Realtor Association, National Association of Realtors, has implemented its position on LGBTQ, and that is our focus when as you recall, when we met with Kathy McMorris Rogers. We're trying to set the example. We're actually ahead of Congress, and we are asking that this Congress, I believe it's the 116th one, take a lesson from us and bring their rules and their focus into this new era of expansion of the rights. I've been told that nearly a decade ago, in 1982, Wisconsin became the first state in the Union to make housing discrimination based on sexual orientation illegal under its fair housing laws. Followed then by Vermont, which was 10 years later, and Minnesota in 1993. So it's a slow to catch on proposition. Overall, 22 states presently, plus the District of Columbia, have non-discrimination laws in place to protect the LGBTQ groups on the basis of sexual orientation. And so I'm learning, as we become familiarized with it, Ken, that it's a high priority that all states should consider enacting. And in the majority of states, the LGBTQ consumers who face unfair housing practices have virtually no recourse when they're eliminated from a transaction because of a prejudice by the seller or the listing agent, or what happens in the people part of this business. So the National Association has rewritten its code of ethics to include the LGBTQ as a protected class, and therefore that's the message we presented to our members of Congress. Did you pick up on that one? This was your first visit in D.C., wasn't it?
This was my first visit for this purpose in D.C. So am I hearing that with regards to the National Association of Realtors, that is now a protected class? Because I heard 22 states.
Only in 22 states.
So less than half of the country.
Quite amazing.
That is, I didn't know that, Terry. That is amazing. That's almost.
So it's not a very good. It's not a very good score.
No, it's not a very good score.
So it's a prideful thing for the National Association of Realtors to say that we've already done this, Congress, and I think that this is a nonpartisan issue, in my opinion.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be any difficulty in awakening our members to the need to come into the new millennium.
Sure.
To have federal laws that coincide with 22 out of 50 states that are supportive of this
So more than half the country does not recognize, does not have protection against discrimination.
Right.
Terry, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
It's not good news to present, but it's a hard fact.
Wow, unbelievable. Okay, so on fair housing, I know we have 3 other topics to cover. I am getting away from the producer, though, to go into our 1-minute break. So my guest, Terry Sullivan here, we're talking about our 2018 federal talking points that we went to D.C. with to protect you and your rights. I'm still a little speechless over that last one. So we will be back in 60 seconds, and you're listening to Real Estate Talk with Ken Sax.
They say it takes a community to raise a family. It also takes one to build a business. I came to Spokane 12 years ago as a Whitworth student, and I planned to leave after graduation. But the more I got to know this community, the more I wanted to become a part of it. My husband and I have built our business in Spokane, and now we're raising our family here too. We operate a consulting company that provides creative business development strategies. Our approach is holistic and dependent on intentional connections and relationships. And no one understands connections and relationships better than GSI. They direct momentum towards investments in our community, provide resources that help business leaders connect, and they're dedicated and passionate about making Spokane great. GSI gives me the confidence to build my business here because they believe every organization, even a small one like mine, adds big value to our community. With GSI's help, Spokane will be a place my son will want to build his career too. I'm Eva Marquette, owner of Freshview. We're creating something greater with Greater Spokane Incorporated.
Hi, this is Kurt Stockwell with Well Dressed Walrus. We are a local website design and development company here in Spokane. What we do is build beautiful, usable websites for local businesses. A website needs to be beautiful, it needs to be usable for your users, your customers, and yourself. Contact us anytime. We'd love to talk with you about your online marketing.
What? You haven't been to the library lately? Stop in today and see that the library is more than books. Spokane County Library District facilities feature on-site technology, including Wi-Fi, computers, and printers, as well as free use of meeting rooms. The Library District offers events and programs for all ages, from story times to career development and employer classes to Social Security workshops. Our staff is well trained and happy to help. Find out more about your library at scld.org.
Welcome back. Again, you're listening to Real Estate Talks. I am your host, Ken Sax. My guest today, Terry Sullivan. We finished our first segment wrapping up fair housing and the 50th anniversary of the Federal Fair Housing Act. And Terry had a few more words he wanted to mention before moving on to our next talking point, being net neutrality. So, Terry, what did you want to close with?
Thank you, Ken. In the current Congress, bills have been introduced in both House and Senate that would add sexual orientation and gender identity as protected classes under the Fair Housing Act. So the National Association is seeking legislation amending the Fair Housing Act to apply to discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, which doesn't exist today.
Good. So we want to add through the National Association the sexual orientation across the country, but also gender identity. So that's what we were talking about. So gosh, that was a long first talking point. But we're going to roll into the next one. I know a lot of confusion on this one. Net neutrality. What is net neutrality, and what do we want?
The Reader's Digest version, Ken, is it's the concept that Internet users should be in control of what content they view and what applications they use on the Internet.
Makes sense.
In April of 2015, the FCC published a rule implementing open Internet regulations that prohibit blocking and throttling or other ways of degrading or interrupting a normal Internet access. And so this became the law of the land until late December of last year. The FCC adopted a new rule that got rid of those regulations. The regulations previously were aimed at preventing blocking, throttling, etc. So it's been lifted. And so the result being that the National Association is concerned about the impact on people like you and me.
Sure.
Not just realtors, but small business owners in whatever profession, having to be affected by slowing down your internet, preventing others from, or allowing others to have a higher transmission speed. So we're hoping that, although this is already in place, that our members of Congress would have 2 words to remember. We want to keep it fair and open.
Mm-hmm.
And the background on is the support of it is based upon the administration's position that this will take the handcuffs off and let the internet service providers be innovative without restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great if it doesn't affect us adversely. So it's mainly a disadvantage for the small business user represented by a lot of us in this town.
Sure, and to make sense of that, in my head, it would be, take this table, for example. So many of us now are online, purchasing products online. Well, imagine a scenario where the small business owner who makes tables now doesn't have the money as the large box stores who have tons of money, and national stores across the country. They can afford the fast service. And meanwhile, the small mom and pop who work in small town USA, who make really good custom crafted tables, they don't have good internet service, and you're getting frustrated because you can't search the inventory, and then you go to a big box store and it's very fast because they're paying for it. The small mom and pop can't afford it. So the question is that really fair?
Of course not.
Right? And so that's to me, when I think of net neutrality, that's what I think of. So good.
We're hoping for the best, Ken.
Yes.
It's probably going to wind up in a lawsuit. It'll be in the federal courts to challenge the FCC's decision. And Congress is considering, I'm told, legislation that could codify those rules and maybe be guided by the fair and open concept that we support.
Right. Well, hopefully it'll be quick. So net neutrality. There's your term of the day. Okay, tax reform. Our third talking point.
Yes. In this last session, the tax cut law became effect, and the realtors, like me, were involved in talking with our members of Congress. And the member of Congress I'm affiliated with is the 4th highest member in the leadership. Kathy McMorris Rogers is the caucus chairman, and so I had a good access to her. I believe that the tax reform, as the House crafted it, was not a good deal. And that's when I met with her in November to discuss that and express my sentiments. Well, when it went to the Senate, we think that it got cured. So the focus of our National Association of Realtors on this matter is to maintain what we have. It has been somewhat compromised. For example, we want to have the things that are in place no further degraded. And for example, the mortgage interest deduction.
Yep.
It's a big deal for the payer of a mortgage. It can effectively reduce your mortgage payment because of the tax deductibility of the mortgage. The limit for loans after 2017 is $750,000 mortgage. Beyond that, you can't deduct that interest. It's not a big deal in Spokane, but in a major metropolitan area, it does impact people. So the fact that was changed is a reason for us to say we can live with it, but it must be indexed to inflation. And the other part of the tax changes that we think should be indexed to modification are the forgiveness of the capital gains on the sale of your principal residence. And so we think, as approaching this from a reasonable standpoint, that those taxes, or those benefits rather, should benefit from the appreciation factor so that we don't lose them. I was told if these 2 items are not changed, over 20 years they lose 45% of their tax deductibility that existed on day one. So that's our reasonable approach to amending what's going on in the fine-tuning of our tax reform. Overall, we were very successful, Ken, as an association. It helps when you're the largest trade association in the world at 1.3 million members. But those members are connected with members of Congress, and that's where we're able to educate and influence, I think. And so we have been able to take credit for the fix that was made. It could have been a lot worse, what I'm saying. And we've also dealt with some matters that benefit commercial realtors who feel like they're the orphan child
Sure.
of association. We think that all of our suggestions or recommendations to fine-tune this reflect all realtors, industrial realtors, commercial realtors, residential, land, farm, etc. And so we have great hopes that our fine-tuning can work. And here's another example why we're optimistic. There is a penalty, there's a tax advantage called state and local sales tax. It's SALT. And in the haste to compose that law, somebody wasn't paying real close attention. This is a mathematical error. The SALT limitation was capped at $10,000 a year, and that includes a single taxpayer and a double filing taxpayer. We think that that's a marriage penalty. We think that the $10,000 is fine for a single person, single filer, but where you have joint filers, we think that they should each get the same benefit. So we ask that that be changed to be $20,000 each calendar year. That's my idea of a reasonable request. Would you agree?
Sure, I would. And, you know, it reminds me of every trip, I think, since 2006, shortly after moving here, that I've made to Olympia, where we talk with legislators. We always seem to be battling legislation or the threat of legislation that would take away one's incentive to own real estate.
Amen.
And that's just a constant. It's a constant. And, you know, the discussions we've had is, you know, why are you always going after real estate? Right? I mean, one of the major economic influencers, and you're trying to do pass legislation that would negatively impact real estate and the movement of real estate and transactions and jobs and everything else behind real estate. Why? It seems like, why is real estate an easy target? It seems like they're always going after real estate.
Well, because we represent a lot of money, but we are the industry that has led us out of every recession, and it's been noted that one sale can contribute to 60 ripple effect transactions after the closing of a home sale.
That's right.
It's just dynamic as it could ever be, and you would think incentivizing is better than penalizing. So we're going to pursue that as a reason not to disincentivize what already exists, what is working. So the last thing on the tax reform is that we think the standard deduction, having been doubled to $24,000 per year, is also a disincentive for home ownership. We think that the previous version was better for the housing industry, the real estate industry in general. So we're going to live with that one. We ask that it too can be indexed to inflation so that it doesn't lose its value as the years proceed.
Good, good, good. Okay, we have about 2 minutes left. National Flood Insurance Protection Reauthorization. That's a mouthful.
Well, I can finish it up real quick. We can't let it expire. It expires July 31st of this year.
Okay.
It has suffered from short-term fixes for a number of years. We also went out of it went out of existence and expired once, and it was determined that each day, 40,000, or each month, 40,000 plus property sales were stopped because the lender wanted the flood insurance and it was not available because they were out of business and the buyer couldn't complete the transaction. It's a big deal.
So without this, about 40,000 transactions a month across the country now will not occur because a borrower cannot get flood insurance.
That's right.
That's huge.
Well, the House now has a tax reform bill that will reauthorize the program for the 5 years. That's what we're looking for. 5 years during which time they can have enough revenue, enough expertise involved to perfect it for the duration. So the Senate now is taking up legislation to amend the House bill to strengthen the flood mapping and the mitigation. So it's just basically got to be maintained with a long-term fix in mind.
Sure. So a reauthorization on something like 5 years versus 6 months.
Yep.
so we don't have to keep addressing this. Gosh, Terry, we are at our last 30 seconds. I'm getting the wave. We've covered our 4 talking points. My guest today has been Terry Sullivan. Should you wish to reach out to Terry, you may reach Terry at 509-443-1890. Terry, I've said it before, thank you for what you do. You do a tremendous job. Your passion, it blows me away. It's an honor to watch it. I could not do what you do, so thank you for everything you do, not only for realtors, but for our consumers, because it's ultimately about you folks. So thank you again for listening. Ken Sax, Real Estate Talks. We'll see you next time.
Real Estate Talk is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask Ken a question, recommend a guest, and watch this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Real Estate Talk is brought to you by our friends at Spokane Association of Realtors. We wish you a great day.